Om Asatoma Satkamaya Tamasoma Jyotirgamaya Mrityorma Amritam Gamaya Aviravirmayethi Rudrayakte Dakshinam Mukham Tenamam Pahi Nityam. May the Divine lead us from the to the real, from darkness to light, from death to immortality. May the Divine Consciousness fill our hearts and protect us. So our subject today is spiritual fitness. We all know what fitness means. From the window of near my desk, I often see people walking and jogging along the river. And clearly there is such a thing as physical fitness, and we take exercises to be physically fit. But we know that we don't live only on the physical dimension, that there are deeper and more inner layers of our personality which need to be fit as well. In Sri Ramakrishna's life, in the book, his conversation, the Gospel of Ramakrishna, there is this one incident when Sri Ramakrishna is sitting and there is a group of devotees and visitors and friends sitting in front of him. And there is this one elderly gentleman who's sitting in a corner of the room and doing japa with his rosary. And Sri Ramakrishna looks at him for a while, and then he raises this question. He says that there are people who meditate so much, and yet, why is it that they don't seem to make much progress? And that kind of a question can sometimes come to our mind as well. That I've been praying for so long, I've been meditating for so long, how much progress I have done. And Sri Ramakrishna's answer was that the measure of the progress we make is related to what he called vyakulata, the intensity of longing to reach the ideal. So when and how does that intensity come in our lives? We are spiritual seekers, we see ourselves as devotees, but how intense we feel the importance of the divine, God or spirit in our lives. Because we know that our lives have these competing interests. There are so many things we are interested in. There are so many things that demand our time, our attention. And clearly, there are some things we feel more intensely than some other things. So in that scale of things, among the competing interests in our lives, where does our spiritual interest lie? How intensely do I think of God? How intensely do I want God compared to the intensity with which I may want other things in life? So that's what Ramakrishna meant when he spoke about vyakulata. So if spiritual progress is of paramount importance to us, then it would seem natural and logical that the intensity of feeling we have to reach that ideal should be higher or better or deeper than the intensity we may have for our other interests in life. So to understand what this fitness or intensity means, it is helpful to take a look at a story we find in one of the very ancient Upanishads. It's called the Chandogya Upanishad. So this is the story about two students, Indra, who is the leader of the celestial ones, the Devas, and Virochana, who is the leader of the Asuras. These characters appear very often in Indian mythology. So Indra and Virochana both approach Prajapati, a great teacher, in order to learn from him. And rather uncharacteristically, we might find that when these two students approach him, even before asking them why they have come or what the purpose of their visit is, Prajapati says, go and practice austerities, meditate for 32 years. Now, you don't have to take it literally, but the idea is ask them to meditate for a long time. So only after they had spent that time in austerities and disciplines, then after 32 years, then he asked them, yes, what have you come here for? And then they said they want to learn about the truth. What is the ultimate truth in life? And Prajapati simply tells them that ultimate truth, the spirit, the Atman, you are that. You are the Atman. That's all the teaching he gave them. This was the most preliminary, and the first lesson was, you are the Atman. And so Indra and Virochana, they go back, and Virochana says, oh, that's pretty simple teaching, because Virochana thought of himself in his physical terms, which is what we all do. When we say I, we generally point to our body. So he says, you are the Atman, and I am this. So the body is the Atman. Problem solved. He thought, I've got the answer. He goes home, and then this is the Atman. He spent the rest of his life taking care of his body as much as he can. Indra, on the other hand, when he went home, he began to say, you are the Atman. How can body be the Atman? Because the Atman is said to be eternal, pure, perfect, imperishable. None of these things are present in the body. Body is very perishable. This cannot be the Atman. But why did he say then you are the Atman? So he goes back to Prajapati and says, I don't get it. What do you mean you are the Atman? The body cannot be the Atman. And then Prajapati says, okay, 32 years more. He does his disciplines. Then he gives him a higher teaching, a deeper understanding of it. Then he goes back and again reflects over what he has heard from his teacher. Again, some of the things don't make sense to him because he tries to go beyond the body. And what does he find? He finds the mind, the intellect, some of the kind of the subtler layers in the body. And he said, are they the Atman? But they keep on changing. My mind is never stable. Mind has its different ups and downs, its emotions and feelings. But the Atman is unchanging. So he's like, no, it doesn't make sense. So he goes to Prajapati again. And he almost knew what Prajapati is going to say. So he said, okay, 32 more years, I'm going to do it. Then after the completion of those 32 years, Prajapati gives him a yet deeper, a more nuanced teaching. Then Indra goes again, goes home, reflects over it. Just see the number of... So don't be too afraid if you have doubts and questions in life. This is very natural. This is natural to have those kind of questions and doubts. So Indra, again, he's still reflecting. Just imagine the amount of reflection he has done. And so again, he has this doubt. Still, it's not completely clear. He's come very close to understanding, but still not clear. So he goes back to Prajapati and says, I kind of get it, but still not very clear. Then Prajapati says, okay, only 5 more years now, 32. And so he does disciplines 5 more years, and then Prajapati gives him that. Because by that time, Indra has become ready. Through all these constantly reflecting deeply and doing these disciplines, he had made himself fit. In that state, when he is fit, Prajapati gives him that lesson, and at once Indra becomes enlightened. He becomes realized. So this is what is behind the idea of competence in life. And that's why this story is one among several stories we find in the Upanishads, from which this principle of competence evolved. In Sanskrit, this is called adhikari vada. Adhikari means a fit student, someone who is fit to undertake whatever they are doing. So what do we learn from the story? Clearly, the need for competence. The Sanskrit word for competence is adhikara, to understand. And this can come only through right preparation. So the amount of preparation, don't be hung up on the word 32 years. People have tried to wonder why 32 and why not 42. It's just enough to know that a fairly long stage of life is preparing ourselves for that highest realization. And that thing, competence, comes through that preparation. The second thing, clearly, which is pretty obvious, is that the people are different. We are different. We are same in many ways. We are all human beings. But we also know that no two amongst us are exactly identical. So it's a recognition that the aptitudes and capacities of people are different. Even when we went to school, there are so many students in a single class, the same teacher, the same lessons are given, but how much each student absorbs and understands, it's not necessarily always the same. And so these capacities and the aptitudes are different. And how much we gain, what knowledge we gain, is directly related to how fit we are. So it's proportional to our fitness. One other thing we see is that Indra went again and again after reflection and asked questions. So the importance of asking questions should never be underestimated. And it's not necessarily asking questions to someone else or a teacher, which is of course important and a part of our growing up, but also asking questions to oneself. Sometimes I think we are in too great a hurry to find answers. And spiritual life is not so much about finding answers, but it's more about asking the right questions. And so sometimes, even if questions come in the mind, it's good to kind of hold that question, hold that doubt somewhere in the corner of our heart. Even if we don't find an immediate answer, let it remain there. Oftentimes we will discover that in most unexpected ways, at most unexpected times, these unanswered questions will find an answer. Either they will find an answer, or we will find this is not the right question. My question needs to be refined. So over the years, if we just have this ability to hold on to the questions in our heart. Google makes it very difficult nowadays to just hold on to questions because we think we get instant answers. Some of you might remember a few years ago in The Atlantic, I think, there was this article called "Is Google Making Us Stupid?" And there was a lot of counter articles and a lot of discussion happened after that. But we will see that just because it's easy to search in Google and find an immediate answer, oftentimes whenever we find something very quickly without much effort, oftentimes we forget it also very quickly. We don't feel the need to hold it because we know, oh, next time I need it, once again I can go to Google and ask. But if you have had to work hard to find answer to some question, you will never forget it. And that's why it's important to keep our question in the heart and keep on thinking, keep on reflecting. And as my Vedanta teacher used to say, that a little bit of what I said before, that it's not about finding answers, it's about refining the question. And you keep on refining the question more and more and more and more. A time will come when you will find the answer hidden in your question itself. When you have refined, you have found a way of rephrasing, asking the question in the right way, the answer is often hidden in the question itself. So that's the quality of our questions will improve through the reflection that we do in life. And finally, we also learn from this story the importance of that it's possible to take a student in a phased manner to that higher stage. So what nuanced teaching that Prajapati gave Indra after this 32, and 5 years, so much of discipline, if on the very first day he had given that very subtle and intricate answer, it probably would have made no sense to him. And so it is important that we go. It's like if there is a place you're going and if there are 10 steps, unless you're some Olympic high jumper or something, we just have to take the first step and the second step and the third step. We just can't jump on the 10th step. And that's more or less the idea. Now, this recognizing the differences that are inherently present in our abilities. Now, before I say anything further, it's not that these differences are like carved in stone. Yes, there are differences, but the ability that we have is not a fixed quantity. If we work hard, if we do the disciplines the way Indra did, our capacity can increase, our abilities can increase. So none of us need think that whatever abilities I have now, that's all which is going to be with me for my life. No, it doesn't have to be. It can reduce. If I'm not careful, if I'm not attentive, if I don't preserve and nourish the talents and skills that I have, I could lose them. So a constant attention, constant care is needed to preserve the strengths that we have, the knowledge that we have, the skills that we have. But if we keep on working on them, we can increase our ability. And that's clear. I mean, all the marathon runners, they didn't simply get up one day and said, let me run 26 miles. It never happens that way. You just have to keep on trying, keep on increasing. And that's what we do. Those of us who meditate know that when we begin, on the very first day we learn meditation, of course there is a lot of enthusiasm, something new we have learned, but we know that the quality of our meditation and the length, how long we can hold on to that thought and remain focused, that increases with practice. It doesn't happen straight away. So this recognizing the differences was what Swami Vivekananda referred to in his very first talk, the welcome address at the Parliament of Religions. He said, I am proud to belong to a religion which has taught the world both tolerance and universal acceptance. We believe not only in universal toleration, but we accept all religions as true. Every person, every way of thinking, every way of practicing, it could be different, but all of them are true and genuine. And that is recognizing the different ways our mind thinks and kind of respecting and welcoming and accepting them all. Now, it's these acknowledging the need of different minds to approach the truth in a manner that is suited to each. That is why in the Vedas we find this thing. We have it, I think we have a framed outside there which says, Ekam Sat Vipra Bahudha Vadanti. It's one of the most ancient teachings in the Vedas, that the truth is one, although it's called by and understood in different ways by different sages. And that is what Sri Ramakrishna meant as well when he said, there are as many paths to the truth as there are number of faiths. But not only are the paths different, those walking on the paths are also diverse. That is how this principle of competence, Adhikaravada, gave rise to the idea of the concept of the chosen deity, Ishtadevata, that yes, all of us seek that transcendent truth, but that truth may appear to us, may speak to us in many different forms, in many different ways. And that's why not everyone who is meditating is necessarily focusing on the same ideal, but that ideal which could be in different name, different form, or even formless. Not only is the ideal could appear in different ways, but the path we choose could also be different. So there is Ishta Devata, and it's also called Ishta Marga. And sometimes in Vedanta, we do speak about the different yogas. Some people might find that the dominant way they can approach their spiritual life could be through selfless activity. Some others might find by directing their emotions and feelings, purifying them and directing them towards a transcendent being. That with the path of bhakti, or the path of contemplation through Raja Yoga, or the path of reasoning and deep inner inquiry after the self. That is what we call Jnana Yoga. So each of these different paths, none of them are exclusive of each other. Although we kind of mention them as four, we should not think that there are some tight walls separating the four yogas. It's just that the dominant characteristic, the dominant way we might approach our spiritual life may change or may be different from person to person. We also see that this principle of competence, Adhikarvada, also was applied in the selection of students, the testing of students. In an Upanishad which many of you have read, it's called the Katha Upanishad. There is this student called Nachiketa who goes to the teacher, Yama, and we see how Yama tests him. When he asks about the highest truth, Yama says, why do you worry about some transcendent truth? I'll give you, there are all these lists mentioned, I'll give you a long life, wealth, gold, and things like the kind of things people might feel. Every time someone buys a lottery ticket, he said, I might get this mega millions. And what Yama offered Nachiketa was more than mega millions. And then Nachiketa said, no, I don't want it. Because he said, would getting this give me that ultimate truth? And Yama said, no, that's not possible, but you can live long, you can be happy, you will lack nothing, and so on. But Nachiketa said, everything in life is perishable. Even if you give me millions and you give me everything, it's still going to go away one day. I want the truth which never goes away, which will never perish. And so he had that wisdom and also that willpower to say no to some immediate benefits to get that highest truth. So there are a number of ways, and in many Upanishads we find, and the Puranas as well, many stories about how teachers tested their students. And that testing is a way to know where the student stands at that time, on which step the student is. If the student is on the first step, the teacher will then help the student go on the second step. Through these tests, if the teacher finds the student is already on the sixth step, then he'll go through the seventh step. So essentially, all the testing is done to know where we stand so that we can be in a phased manner, our evolution might become easy. We see that students of Ramakrishna's life know that he tested his students as well. Very, very rigorous testing. And he was very, very strong about certain things. So he said that there was this book called the Ashtavakra Samhita. And it's a very highly non-dualistic text. And so he had told his immediate students, none of them should even look into that book. Because he knew at that stage of their life, rather than helping them, that book would have in fact been a hurdle. And he said, among them, he first found Narendra, who became Vivekananda later on, that he was ready. At that stage, he was ready to to grasp and understand the teaching in that book. So he said, only Narendra can read that. The rest of you shouldn't read it. So those are the ways when the teacher guided the student about what they could or what they couldn't or shouldn't do. As with many things in life, some of these principles which evolve from these ancient teachings, over time, sometimes these teachings, because every principle, every generation, there are people who want to re-evaluate it, to interpret it in their own way. And as things change, the quality of the meaning they extract from it would depend on the quality of the people who are studying it and interpreting it. So there have been periods in Indian history when this principle of competence, when it fell into the hands of some people who themselves were not very competent, they distorted it a little bit. And so the meaning of Adhikaravada changed a little bit from the principle of eligibility the principle of competence to conditions for eligibility. So, and clearly, one of the fears among the people was, if this highest teaching was given to all, then either they wouldn't understand it, or the power that we now have, because we have the teaching, we would no longer have. And so conditions were put about who is eligible to, who has access to the books in which these teachings are. That's why not everyone was allowed to read the Vedas. There was also conditions for the access to teachers. Not everyone could approach a teacher. And usually, very typical of the way human beings have acted throughout history, the people who made the rules, they said, usually their family and their clan and those around them, oh, these are the people who are exceptions. These people will have access. The rest of you will not have access. Now, clearly, not everyone did this way, but a good number of people did. But there were reformers in every generation who militated against this way, this kind of a wrong characterization of this principle of competence. And they strove to make this knowledge accessible to all. So throughout history, there has been this tension between what we sometimes might say the orthodoxy and then the reformers. Some trying to interpret the teachings in one way and the others trying to open it out, make it easily accessible to all. Swami Vivekananda, closer to us in history, was among those reformers who wanted these teachings, that there should be no barriers, that everyone should have access to these teachings. So this is what he said. He said, "It shall no more be a rahasya, a secret. It shall no more live with monks in caves and forests and in the Himalayas. It must come down to the daily, everyday life of the people. It shall be worked out in the palace of the king, in the cave of the recluse. It shall be worked out in the cottage of the poor, by the beggar in the street, everywhere. Anywhere it can be worked out. Therefore, do not fear whether you are a woman or a Shudra or this or that, for this teaching is so great, says Krishna, that even a little of it brings a great amount of good." And so there are these, as I said, there are these factors. Today, in the times in which you and I live, most of these restrictions that were put don't hold true anymore, because clearly the internet has changed. All of these teachings which were very restricted to certain groups of people are freely, most of it is available for free online. And so these restrictions no more hold true. But it's good to know how things have happened in history. But one thing is very clear, that lack or denial of access is never the only problem. The reality is that we can take in only as much as we can digest. If you go to a restaurant and then order some 10 dishes, and you may love them all, but clearly how much we can eat and how much we can digest will depend on how much capacity we have. And so same is true with spiritual knowledge as well. And as I said before, whatever capacity we may have now, it can be developed and it can be increased. And so it's very important to have a reasonably good understanding of what our strengths are and what our weaknesses are. And everyone has them. So we don't have to be ashamed about it. So we don't have to go on telling others, advertise what our... People don't mind advertising their strengths. But weaknesses, we don't want everybody to know. And that's okay. But we should know. We should know what we lack, where we need to work. If we have that understanding, then making choices in life becomes very easy. And that's simply whatever in life will help me preserve my strength, and whatever in life will help me eliminate my weaknesses, I should say yes. And if it's just the other, I should say no. And so if I'm able to preserve my strength, then I can work on it and increase it. If I work on eliminating my weaknesses, then one by one, I can get rid of them and become a better person, a more fit person. Now, we've spoken so much about fitness and competence, and we get an idea of what it means, but these are still rather ambiguous terms. What does it mean to be spiritually fit? And so we need something more concrete, something that is a kind of an actionable part of spiritual life, so to speak. And it exists. So traditionally, there is this template, you might call it, about 4 practices which need to be done and which will help us measure how fit we are in spiritual life. So these 4 practices in Sanskrit, they call it sadhana chatushtaya. Sadhana is discipline, chatushtaya means a group of 4. So 4 practices, sadhana chatushtaya. So for convenience, I can just name them, all the 4. They are discernment, detachment, development of 6 treasures, and desire for freedom. I phrase them this way so you have all 4 Ds. So it's helpful to remember that way. So discernment, in Sanskrit it's called viveka. Detachment, in Sanskrit it's called vairagya. Then development of 6 treasures. In Sanskrit, that 6 treasures is called Shat Sampatti. So there are 6 qualities that we should try to develop in our life in order to become fit to practice spiritual life. And finally, desire. Not all desire is bad. Sometimes people think, oh, desire is bad. No, it depends on what we are desiring. And so a desire for freedom, in Sanskrit that's called mumukshutva. One final thought. It's important that sometimes, it's one of the things that when we turn to spiritual life, we have to also say, why have I turned to spiritual life? Why is it important to me? Why am I doing it? There is a ancient Sanskrit saying which says, prayojanam anuddishya na mandopi pravartate, that not even a stupid person does anything without a motive. So if we are practicing spiritual life, there has to be some motive. Why am I doing it? Why do I think of God? Why do I want to meditate? And we might have a different ways of expressing about why we are doing it. But we should know why we are doing something. And oftentimes, what we read in books, what we have heard, is that spiritual life can give me the highest, the greatest. And in experiential terms, what the books often say is that it can give me eternal bliss, in the sense that we do have happiness in life, but we know that the present happiness that we have comes and goes. It begins, it ends, it wanes, and then we are happy again, and it's interspersed. It goes with sukha and dukkha. There is happiness, but there is also sorrow, and there is happiness and there is sorrow. So it's not that we don't know what happiness means. We have happiness, but is it possible to be in a state where happiness is all that remains and any kind of sorrow and suffering totally vanishes? And so many religious texts, in one way or the other, either in the language of mythology or in language of philosophy, different ways, the ultimate idea is that anything that constricts me, anything that makes me unfulfilled in some way, all those obstructions will be removed and I'll be completely free and just be happy. Now, and then of course we think the words that get used in different theologies, we can speak in terms of salvation or nirvana. In Vedanta they speak about freedom or moksha or mukti. There are different terms and different ways of the concepts are described. And whichever way of these way thinking kind of resonates with us, like, that's what I want. That's how I want to do, which is great. But once we have determined what we want, the next thing to say is, what should I do now to get that? So there is the goal and there is the means. Sometimes what can happen is that we may remain so much focused on the goal that we don't do what needs to be done to reach that goal. And Swami Vivekananda called it as our great defect in life. So these are his words. Very carefully listen to it. They're very powerful and very true. Swami Vivekananda said, "Our great defect in life is that we are so much drawn to the ideal. The goal is so much more enchanting, so much more alluring, so much bigger in our mental horizon that we lose sight of the details altogether. But whenever failure comes, if we analyze it critically, in 99% of cases, we shall find that it was because we did not pay attention to the means. Proper attention to the finishing, strengthening of the means is what we need. With the means all right, the end must come." So yes, we should be aware of the end, of what we want, but we should also know then what path I should follow. What should I do now to reach that goal? It's a little bit like you're going on a long drive and you say, this is the destination, this is where I want to go. And then this is the route, this is the road I need to take. After that, once I've determined that this road will take me there, I should pay attention to the road when I'm driving. If I'm driving, I'm still thinking about the place I'm going to go, and I may not be paying attention, then accidents can occur. And that's exactly how things may happen. That yes, there is this ultimate goal of transcendence, but right now, before I've reached that stage, I should be focused on what I should be doing now. And so these are some of the thoughts I thought I could share with you this morning. And so it's an opportunity for us to look in our heart and see, where do I stand in my spiritual quest? What am I doing in my life to make myself more fit to reach that goal? So that's an opportunity we have. And so what we could do going forward in the satsangs that are yet to come in the weeks and months ahead, we can take a look at these 4 Ds: discernment, detachment, development of the 6 treasures, and desire for freedom. Kind of have a chance to reflect on them a little bit more, and that will give us a chance to measure our own spiritual fitness. Because how much progress we make will depend on our fitness. Oftentimes, therefore, Holy Mother used to say, in one place she says that people come and everyone says, Mother, we need your grace, kripa. Do have you? We want divine grace. And Mother once said, what is the use of simply asking for grace? As if, because we somehow think, oh, God is holding that grace in the heart. And God, please release a little bit of grace, and God releases it. That's one way of thinking. But what Mother is saying is, no, grace is always available, right now, right here. But she says, grace comes and goes. We may not even be aware of it, of the grace, if we have not become fit to recognize it, if we haven't become fit to hold it. So if grace comes, and if I'm not able to identify it, I'm not able to recognize it, then it's as bad as not having it. Or if grace comes, I'm able to recognize it, but I'm not able to hold it. The moment is, oh, here is the grace, and it's gone because I haven't made myself fit. So we see how important fitness is. God's grace is always available. It's not something that is being withheld from anyone at any time. It's we who have not opened the doors of our heart and to allow that grace. And so the work is to be done here. And that's the idea behind fitness. There's a lot to think about, and I'm sure many of you have thought about it already, but let us keep on thinking about it together in the weeks and months ahead, so that our own spiritual lives will deepen more and more, and then we reach the goal that we have set before ourselves soon. Om Jananim Saratam Devim Ramakrishnam Jagadgurum Padapadme Tayo Shritva Pranamami Muhur Muhu.